Right, today is basically just a little beginner's guide for the avid bass angler. At this stage of the year, we basically going to be either in pre-spawn, spawn, and then probably in the next 3 weeks to a month and so on, we're going to start going into the full-on post-spawn period. Pre-spawn is basically when the males start moving out of the deeper water onto shallow sandbanks or gravel banks and so on, anything with a little bit of sunlight. Um, where they're going to be coaching the females to a nest and sand that they've cleaned up prior. So basically what they will do is they'll basically find an area, I would say up to about a meter, that they will fan with their tails and clean up and so it will have good oxygen, obviously for egg production. The females will then move in from the deep water and then choose a suitor and choose a nest and stone of their liking, and then by that stage and so on, then they'll do their copulation and they'll do their spawning. And during the post-spawn, what will happen is at the latter part of the spawning period, the female then moves off the nest, goes into deeper water, sits and sulks there and so on, because she hasn't eaten, she's exhausted, and then the male will pretty much start taking care of the nest. And at the post-spawn period, he will start slowly but surely coaching them into deeper water, into open pockets that he can manage, and then sit under the shoal of bait fish protecting them, and in which case he is extremely aggressive to anything that comes past it. Now, pre-spawn, as the little males move into the nests and fan them, they are very, very irritated by anything that drops in the nest. Now, you can throw thousands of brands at this, and at the end of the day, and so on, you realize that you made a big mistake and so on by having 500 different things that cloud your judgment when it comes to the day that you want to bass fish. So this is basically just a beginner's guide to things and so on that I've used in the past. Although it was generally used for other applications, I've noticed that it's got a variety of different applications. So let's start. This little crawl is basically made for saltwater. It's more of like an estuary little crawl. There is nothing except for the Yum net crawl that could be potentially or could be deadlier for spawning bass. This little thing is absolutely deadly, cheap and very, very effective. And now the main thing is with especially pre-spawn bass is that they like things that are shorter. So try to deviate or try to move away from longer lures like this. Although this one with that trigger point at the back is a very, very, very good option. What I generally do is I'll take at least a third of that off and make almost like a little dragonfly stick bait out of it. And you'll immediately see the difference in the results. Because what a male will do is, male is not there to eat the lure. He's there to take it with his mouth and slowly move out of the nest and sand and spit it out. So it is very imperative to use braid, especially like a yellow color braid, with a long enough leader and so on, not to spook the fish, but that the braid knot and the braid in the leader is short enough so you can actually see the braid moving when the fish picks it up. So even if you're blind casting and sand, you'll see the little flicker and then slowly but surely starts moving off with it. So it's more of a sight bite than actually feeding the bite. Okay, so that one to me is deadly, especially when they're fishing in pockets or little sandbars in between grass pockets. This one over here is more like a drop shotty kind of a style lure. This one for me is extremely effective as well. The reason why is it's got a very soft little tail action. So if you take the back of your rod, you pitch into the nest and so on, what you do with your rod is you just tap the butt section. So you, in essence, making movement or making this thing move and not moving it. So it's going to have a lot of little fluttering movements, but it's not moving off the nest. And that is a general idea. And so they will not go and chase after it. It has to stay in the nest, but it has to move. The exception to the rule is the little white fluke. Pre-spawn, spawn, post-spawn. Little white fluke for me is an absolute killer. Post-spawn, if you run this through a shoal of little bait fish with the male sitting under the nest, or under the fry, he will absolutely smoke this one. But this one as well with the little jig head. I don't like to fish it with a bass hook. I fish it with a little jig head, and literally just little wagtail actions, rod flicking upwards, will also trigger a bite. Now, I'm not a crawl fan, but I do use them a lot during spawn. Generally something with a slightly smaller leg, but this one's got a lot of action to it. And the reason why I like to use crawls is because genetically the bass would have carried that inherent hatred for any kind of crawls around their nests that they had, or that they're obviously American and so brought in from America. So they've got the crawl and the crawl eats their eggs. So that hatred and so would have genetically been carried over. It sounds crazy, but it's true. So now you've got a couple of varieties and so on. I like to generally go with slightly lighter colors in the nest. You don't want to chase them and so on, but you want to create that annoyance. So I like your watermelon red, your green pumpkin red, sometimes even muddy colors and so on, like tilapia magic works quite well. And then things with a two-tone, like this one with the blue and the purple, and in very muddish kind of conditions and so on, if the bass don't have the choice of having clear water, I would then obviously throw my darker colors. Yeah, yet again, it's also a drop shot lure, but because of its size, it's a perfect little bait to pitch into a nest and so on without making them spook. These are direct imports, tiny little minnows, also absolutely killer, also small in size, small in shape, absolutely brilliant little bait to use with especially the size 2 to size 4 hooks. And now a lot of people would say, why don't you use bigger hooks? Because they would generally swallow the small hooks. But in this case, especially when it comes to pre-spawn, the bass only suck it into the front of his mouth most of the time, because he just wants to bite down on it and rid himself of it and spit it out outside the nest. So they generally don't suck it in all that deep, with exception. Now, jigs. Jig is something that I don't use a lot during spawn, but as of late I've been using it, and it seems to be working quite well. If I could recommend a website, I would definitely go under Thai Pick Patrol, if you want to see a genius at work. Now, for these jigs and so on, what I would generally do, seeing that the male picks it up quite softly, is that I'll actually take that little weed guard and I'll cut it slightly shorter, as long as it covers that tip. So always take it slightly shorter and fan it out like a little brush. Soft little up and down movements would also do the trick. Right, net baits are floating baits. Normally you work with a flattened down little jig head, and they would stand upright. So it's an ideal type of lure to use if you don't want to move it off an area and so on, or off a spot and create the vibration, because it actually works vertically rather than horizontally. And another example of it is the Yum Ned Mono. Yum Ned Mono again, tail up in the air, head pointing downwards, and if any kind of minnow or any kind of fish is pointing head down and standing in the nest, it obviously means he's busy eating the eggs. So that one last year I had great success with. Price wise, they're around about the 90 rand class, well worth it, considering that some of your more expensive brands can run into 250, 300 rand a packet. Next, now this is a lure that I found last year, especially in heavy cover, especially when you've got a heavy cover with almost hidden kind of sandbars that you have to actually break through the fine grasses to get to the sand. I found that the Phantom Goby, generally they go for around about 140, 150 rand in some shops. 50 rand, same, exactly the same brand. Works particularly well because it's a goby pattern. It's got a flattened down belly, so it's always going to land on its stomach. So yeah, and it's got an unbelievably good tail action. So the softest little bounce can create a tail vibration that they pick up with their lateral sideline. And it's also got the hook buried or embedded in the top fin, which you can cut off. If you want to cut off the fin, you can cut off the fin to expose the hook, but I don't think it's necessary. You can actually keep it the way it is. Little killer. Now, a lot of guys will fish soft plastics 99% of the time, but I've actually noticed over the last few years, especially when the females are around the males, he has a tendency of acting like quite a breaker, and he wants to show the female that he can take care of his business, which means he will quickly get rid of any other little males, little suitors and so on, that wants to, you know, basically get between him and the female. In that case, in some little jerk baits, especially, I would normally like to go with a slow rising or a suspended jerk bait. Now, this Rapala is a sinking jerk bait, which is an exception to the rule. This is an IU color. This one does extremely well in sand, especially when you drop it between the male and the female. He generally will intercept it. Catch the male, just take him down, maybe like 5 or 6 meters down the embankment, put him down, put him in the water and sand, come back and sand, and then pitch it onto the female. And most of the time in sand, she'll then take over where he left off in sand, and she'll take a strike at it. Okay, inexpensive, expensive. That one's got the halogen flash foil. Brilliant little lure, always runs true. So yeah, I've got to give it to Rapala and saying, if it's not broken, don't fix it. Brilliant lures. Hook wise, I do have a tendency of liking my size 2, size 1, size 1 hooks, and nothing bigger than that, depending on the type of bait that you use. But as I said, I like short hooks. A very, very good gem is a Komatsu, size 1.0, and also another hook that I seem to do quite well with is the BKK. I don't think it needs any introduction to the esteemed bass anglers. They seem to like this hook. It's extremely sharp. I mean, anything that it touches, it pretty much just sinks straight into. So yeah, Komatsu, BKK, Mustard not so much. Yeah, I would say those two would probably be my favorites. And then little jiggets, Wild Sports, which is reasonably new on the market, brings out little micro jiggets, which only recently acquired. This is only when the males are still on the nest and sound pre-spawn. I would say during the spawning period and the females getting into the fray, do not use these small jiggets because she will generally engulf it, because she's normally about 1/3 to 2/3 larger than what the male is. Split shots, weight-wise, I like to peg by weight with a little gummy stop. I like to use very, very small split shots. 32-ounce tungstens, 16-ounce tungstens. I don't like to go anything heavier than that because you do want it to be a kind of a finesse movement. Right, post-spawn. Post-spawn patterns, you can actually move to slightly bigger lures. You can run choppers, whopper ploppers. You can use white flukes 5-inch, paddle tails. There's a variety of different things, and it's a very, very aggressive reaction strike. Normally either surface or just subsurface. I would say anything up to about 10-15 centimeters under the surface. The males react quite aggressively to that. Females, I would say, would probably be at least another week, 2 weeks after that and so on before they really start to bite again. They're hungry, they need to feed and so on, but they're obviously going to have that inverted belly because they got rid of all the eggs. Now, something very interesting that we've noticed over the last couple of years as well is that bass don't all spawn at the same time. Even if they're from the same area, they won't always spawn at the same time. Some of them will actually hold back. The female has got a egg plug, which is like a hardening that she has on her belly. That would be released by the male, and so by the male quivering against her and releasing that, and so to release the eggs. Now what she can do is she can actually reproduce that egg plug and hold onto her eggs for as long as it takes, and so for the conditions to be right. So you can have them spawn anything from late August, September, October. I've even seen them up to November. So yeah, whenever you go to the water and say expect the unexpected, take pretty much anything for all three of these conditions. I would say if you want one lure that will pretty much do for all the above, I would go with the little fish patterns. Any little fish patterns, that 3 to 4 inch flukes, yeah, I don't think you can really go wrong. If you had to go into war with one, I would say little jerkbait and little fish pattern. Okay, I hope that helps.